With the summer holidays in 1989 now in reach, I was getting a bit bored of my little Suzuki TS50ER's 40 mile an hour head down snot on the clock's performance and really craved something a little hair livelier. So when I spotted a white Yamaha 175 trials bike with its red stripe in my mate Paul's yard, it seemed perfect. Old Keith, who worked part-time at then with Paul and would later work for me too, said he'd only just come in, but was bound to sell quick, being so tidy and all. Happily, my own wheelbase had increased since the aborted larger bike purchase from Paul the previous year, meaning I wasn't too concerned about the prospect of father acting up upon its arrival. A deal was done with the bike being delivered next day. What a revolution! It wasn't that much heavier than the little Suzuki, making it still easy to throw about, but there was just no comparison performance wise. With my light frame on board, the Yamaha's front wheel would try to pull the air in first and second gear if you got a bit urgent with the throttle. Someone had fitted an expansion chamber exhaust right through, so it sounded great when you hit the power band. Rather than take the new bike to my grandparents' small holding, I kept it at home over the summer holiday. One of the lads who came playing pool sometimes had an uncle who owned a farmhouse with a big private drive. This near straight run was close to half a mile long. It was all a bit dilapidated and full of potholes with lots of loose gravel, but within pushing distance of the estate. His uncle didn't mind us mucking about down there as long as we didn't come too close to his house. We spent hours just zipping up and down, me on that 175, old Harry on his MT50, and another lad who had a battered to Al Honda H100. Most of the time we were two or three up on each bike, which made the MT50 deathly slow despite Harry's mods. The girl I was sort of seeing at the time, well, actually, she was seeing a much older boy who I'd been selling condoms to the year previous, and went on eventually to marry him. But I didn't know this then, bear in mind. And her couple of mates would often turn up with bottles of wine or cider, sitting drinking on the little bridge wall over the stream, playing tapes on a boombox, and generally egging us lot on as we blasted past. It was great while it lasted, but like everything when you're a teenager, it came to a bit of a sour end. September 1989. Summer had been pretty fine. My digestive issues were still rumbling on, but on better days with that score, I was employing them to good use, in teenage boy terms at least. A few evenings after the holidays ended, though, suddenly things were not so great. We very rarely played pool for money. If we did, it was usually just for fags or loose change. But this particular evening, though, things were starting to escalate. The lad, whose uncle owned the private drive, was in. To start with, a bit of a light-hearted challenge was thrown down by him and another boy, accepted. They played a few games, the result going back and forth. But as the ante got upped and some big talk got issued through the fag smoke fug, things started to turn hostile. The rest of us had stopped playing the fruit machine and turned the telly down as the last game had got underway. 40 quid was on table in fivers and coins, which for a bunch of kids either still at school or on YTS scheme wages was a fair chunk of money, given that in those days 10 fags were under a quid and a motorbike tank full of fuel was about double that. It was all pretty intense, and once the final ball went down, the shit really started hitting the fan. The lad who initially laid down the challenge and had lost his money started going on about the state of the table, chucking his cue case about, and when I asked him to stop, he rounded on me and I was shoved against the wall with a pool ball being pushed into my face. Mother, who had obviously heard the commotion, appeared in the doorway. He moved towards the door, his shoulder bunting her to one side, and she told him to behave or his father would be telephoned. This enraged him further, calling her various names and where we could stick our pool table. My dad had not long arrived back from work and was just getting his dinner out of the oven. On hearing Mum being abused, he was out and onto this boy like a jack in the box. The lad shook free and bolted out the door with my father in hot pursuit. I was towing my mother along as she tried to stop him by hanging on to his pullover. This being woolen was unravelling at a fairish rate as all three got out onto the road. Dad, then in his early 40s, was no match speed-wise compared to a 16-year-old, especially having attached my mum to his jumper like a tail flag, though this quarry had no time to mount the motorbike parked on our drive, leaving it until the early hours to sneak back and collect it. The next afternoon we were buzzing up and down the private drive when my Yamaha started to sound pretty sick. I checked its oil, which was fine, but the noise got worse. The engine was toast, big ends knocking like a hammer. The oil pump feed cable had snapped, so only tick-over amounts of two-stroke oil were getting into the engine, running the bearings dry. I leant it against the bridge wall whilst the others carried on with their bikes, standing commiserating with the girls. An old pickup then showed up a few minutes later, and it was the lad's uncle who owned the drive. Right, you lot can piss off. I've had absolutely enough of you on my property, and if you come back, I'll call the law. His nephew obviously tipping him off about the night before's events. We all slouched off with me pushing the stricken bike back to the spares pile in the garden. Since school had started again, I hadn't had a visit from my friend with benefits from up on the estate. She was about but barely spoke to me at all whilst in company, so when I spotted her alone on the wrecked bench, headphones on, I wandered over for a chat, but I barely got to hello and how's it going before she stood up to walk away. As she reached the gate with me still sat on the bench, her friend's boyfriend and his much older mate came out of the end of the cul-de-sac. They went into a huddle and she stayed still whilst the two blokes came over to me. "What are you hassling her?" the younger one asked. "What on earth you on about? I just said hello and asked how she was," I said, getting to my feet to walk home. "That's not what she says." And with that he started pushing me. For once I wasn't outgunned by numbers, and this lad was only 2 years older, but of a similar height and maybe a stone or so heavier than me. I pushed back. "Fucking goon, mind your own business," I shouted, pinning him to the chain link fence by his throat. Suddenly I was on my back amid the broken bottles and fag butts. I stood up and went to walk away, but they grabbed me. The big fella, who was at least 28 by then, held my arms behind my back as the other rained blows on my face. I took a real bouter to my right eye that fractured the socket, and a few on the cheek and jaw. The big one let me go and I dropped to my knees. They went to walk away and I grabbed a bottle and ran at them. The big one knocking it out of my hand and shoving me to the deck again. I stayed down and they strolled off laughing along with the girl who'd been watching proceedings. I looked down, my face throbbing, to see the glass on my brand new birthday present watch smashed. Now I was going to have to go and explain all this to my mum. Hello there. Thank you for watching this video. If you've enjoyed this one, would like to see a few more, please subscribe and give it a like as well. Also join my Facebook page as well. It's all appreciated. Means a lot. All the best.